Hi, I'm Nicholas T. Davis, and welcome to the Central New York Writers Marketplace Virtual Showcase. And I have with me Erin Kelly. She's a very good author friend of mine. In fact, we actually met at karaoke. That's where we met in the first place. And so she's here to tell us about her books and a little bit about her writing. Um, welcome, Amy. Yeah, welcome, Erin.
Welcome.
Could you tell me a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and what your hobbies are other than writing?
Sure. Yeah. Good to be here, Nick. Thank you for doing this. My name is Amy, but I write as Erin Kelly. It is a tribute to my late stepfather, Tim, who passed away with cancer in 2003. I grew up in Nedrow, New York, which is just south of Syracuse. And other than writing, my usual hobbies are drawing, watching movies, playing video games, and taking long naps. I also like to take my dogs for WALKs, but I won't talk about that right now because they're listening over there.
Mm.
So,
All right. Can you tell us a little bit about your latest book?
yes. So I write the Tainted Moonlight series. Book one is Tainted Moonlight, and that starts the show. Then I have Captured Moonlight, which is the sequel. And then my latest book is Infected Moonlight, which came out last year. And it is the third book in the series so far. And without any spoilers or anything, I write about it's an urban fantasy series about a supernatural virus outbreak. And so it's an ongoing saga from there. And it's right now it's available on Amazon, on Kindle, or paperback, and I'm working on getting it available to other outlets soon.
Okay. What's your next project going to be?
My next project, I'm currently working on the fourth book of my series, as well as a prequel for it that takes place at the beginning because it takes the first book actually starts 5 years after the initial outbreak, so all the TP has returned to shelves, stuff like that. But yeah, but I'm working on a few outlines for some other projects that I'd like to write down the line as well. I'm hoping that in 2021 I can start branching out a little bit more. I'm continuing the Tainted Moonlight series. I don't have an ending planned for that yet, but I am also thinking of some standalone stories and possibly another series that I have in the works. And that series doesn't really have a title yet, but it's going to be more fantasy based and young adult, whereas Tainted Moonlight is new adult urban fantasy. And so I'm working on some that, and as well as that short stories. I'm trying to do a little horror anthology as well because I've always loved the horror genre, and I dabble a little in there with my werewolves and vampires and other beasties, but I would like to pay more of a proper homage to horror.
Who are some of your author influences that influence you to write?
Well, ever since I can remember, I've always enjoyed reading and writing. I used to draw picture stories when I was really little, and I've always been a very active reader as well. My mom used to read to us, and my dad would make up stories at night before bed, and they both really encouraged me and my imagination. They've always been very supportive of me as an artist. I was very fortunate for that. As far as books went, and authors that inspired me, I really loved R.L. Stine and Christopher Pike when I was growing up. I actually skipped over a lot of Goosebumps because I thought that Fear Street was too kiddish and I wanted something more sophisticated. And so I wanted to read more grown up books and wanted to read real chapter books when I was young. So, which is why I also started reading Stephen King when I was about 9 or 10 years old. So, which he writes horror, but it's definitely adult. So I opened my eyes to a couple things. Um, anyway, so I always yeah, so I've always been kind of drawn to like more series based and things. And when I was in 5th grade, I started basically writing fan fiction, and I wanted to challenge myself to write real chapter books too. So I started about then and started with this crossover series of stories that was based off of things that my brother, sister, and my best friend Tina, hi Tina, um, wrote throughout middle school all the way up through high school. And one of my teachers was actually one of my first fans fans of my work, Mr. James, who was my social studies teacher. So shout out to him. And he was one of the only people, actually the only person that I would let borrow my books at the time. So yeah, so he was the only one who could borrow my books so that I would let it be out of my sight. All my friends had to read it while I was there because I was really afraid of losing it. So
Yeah, that's funny because my 7th grade teacher influenced me too. He got me started writing back when I was about 12. Um, what's your biggest challenge you face as a author?
the biggest challenge that I face is actually like rewriting and editing. Sometimes the story that you want to tell needs finessing, and it can be a challenge to find a way to rework something that you are so close to. So it helps to have beta readers and help spot those initial plot holes and things. I used to be kind of more of a pantser when I wrote, so I was someone who wrote as they go. But I find that, especially with a series, it helps me focus when I'm able to outline. So I usually have my little outline skeleton, and then I flesh it out as I go along. So I've adapted my writing technique as I stepped out of writing for fun and began to publish my stories.
How do you respond to negative reviews?
Um, I feel that negative reviews help us see things that we miss in our own work. Sometimes we are just too close to the material. I spent over a decade setting up my first 3 books, and most of that was spent on the first book. There's sometimes things we overlook because we are too close to it, like I kind of said before. So it's important to consider that negative feedback. For example, when I first released Tainted Moonlight, I got a lot of great feedback from my readers, but the main hangup people did have was that I would switch tenses, and I got the bad advice from a article I'd read online. No surprise there. I should have did a little more research. But it was to basically do action scenes were more active and present tense, and then everything else was in past tense, so it kind of clashed, and some readers had a hard time with that. So I learned from the experience, and I hired a professional editor. And by some twist of fate, her name is Erin as well. So hi to Erin, the real Erin. And I love her to pieces. She's wonderful. She's wonderful to work with, and it's really opened my eyes on how to improve myself as a writer too. And I also think it's important to note that there's a book for every reader. So every criticism that you get may be that your book wasn't meant for that person, and that's okay. Like everyone's entitled to their own opinion. Maybe they didn't like something about how you wrote it, and that's fine. But overall, I think that positive or negative feedback helps in the long run, because the more reviews and the more likely people will see it on Amazon, the more likely you will hit those readers that do like your story. So just taking it in stride and learning to improve yourself is the 2 things that I take away from that.
And what's your best advice to give to new authors?
Write as often as possible, learn from your mistakes, and take criticism and learn from it when you can. It's important to have honest feedback. If you want to make a career out of writing, you need to do it professionally. A professional puts their best foot forward, and you're more likely to keep your readers interested, not just with a good story, but with good grammar. A reader can't enjoy your story if they lose the meaning because you've accidentally misspelled something or you use the wrong tense, like I did in my case. You gotta Sometimes you gotta save up and invest in an editor or Grammarly or something like that to help polish your story more. I recommend doing both if you can. because the more humanized, the better. So that always helps. So there's always a cheaper way to do something, but that doesn't always mean that's the best route to go. But it's not easy to get started, but you want to put your best foot forward. That's what's really important too. So it's good. Um, it's good to hear feedback, whether you join a critique circle and or your friends beta read, whatever the case may be. Talk to other authors. That's really the most important thing. Is don't be afraid to share your story, because us authors know we're not going to steal your ideas. We have too many of our own. So it's very important that if you're comfortable sharing your story with friends or family or someone else, that they can read it too, because ultimately, if you do want to get published, you're going to have someone read it. So you might as well get honest feedback for that.
Okay. Do you design your own covers, or does somebody design them for you?
Right now, I design my own covers. I have a great local photographer that I licensed the photo of for my first book, and then I used some stock images that I bought for the second. But the first the photographer's his name is Everett Regal. He's a wonderful wildlife photographer out of Phoenix, New York, so not too far away, and he's wonderful to work with. So, but I am planning on revising my covers as the series goes on. I kind of wanted to adapt it a little bit more. So I'm going to be working with someone soon, but so I'm going to have a little bit of experience with both. But right now, because before I was a writer, or actually I've always been a writer. So, but I went to school for media arts and animation, which is just a big fancy word for graphic designer. So I've done marketing and things like that with that. So I would recommend, if you have that experience, definitely do it. Or if you feel confident, you have some really good covers. I mean, you have really excellent colors that are covers that you've made that fit your genre. So I did my research. I looked at what was popular in my genre, and so like urban fantasy. At the time when I had it out, there was a lot of silhouettes and things like that. So I kind of went off that to make it, because my favorite author, her name is Carrie Vaughn, and she writes the Kitty Norval series, which is another urban fantasy story that's set in Colorado. And she had that kind of style where she had, and I like that because when you have the character more ambiguous, it kind of leaves more to the imagination of the reader. So that's kind of the thing I did to make that. So shout out to Carrie Vaughn as well, because she's been a fantastic writer. I highly recommend her series. It's a lot of fun.
You were talking about marketing before. How do you market your book?
Right now, what I do is I use social media to my advantage as much as possible. So I have like Twitter, I have Facebook, I have Instagram, and you'll hear this from a lot of different authors too. It's important to have an author platform, and that's basically where people can find you. And I have a website, so I use a lot of social media and technology to reach out to people, but I also find it's very important to get out there when you can. Obviously, right now we're in some strange times, but usually I like to go to conventions. I will purchase a booth, or if you're not sure you want to make the investment of a actual full like booth, you can always go to conventions, bring some copies of your book with you or bookmarks, those type of things. Like this little bookmark here is a great investment to make, because that's ways you can pass them out to someone at work, or you can say, hey, this is you're at the grocery store, and oh god, these are all bad examples because that's happening for a lot of people, including myself right now. But anyway, yeah, just getting yourself out there and making those connections. But conventions are so key, because you can also meet people. You get instant feedback sometimes. I've had people buy my book on a Friday, come back to me on a Saturday or a Sunday and say, hey, I love this book so far, or hey, I love this book. Used to be, oh, hey, I love this book, but your tenses are wrong. But I haven't had that in a while, ever since I fixed that. Um, So it's kind of really good to hear these type of things from people firsthand and getting out there and meeting people. So it's a lot of fun, and you also see instant results because you're there with your book, so you can be there, you can sign it, and people love that. So it's a great way to promote yourself, and I highly recommend doing it. And best advice with that too is try to find a convention or a show that fits your genre. Some people do better at craft fairs, and that's cool because that's where your audience is going to be. But some people, like I find my books do very extremely well at comic book conventions and things like that. So it's good to kind of know your market and do a little bit of research with that, and then kind of expand. And don't forget your libraries too, because a lot of libraries are willing to host different shows as well. So, and they usually do it for free. So that's my little advice with marketing.
How long does it take you to write a book usually?
That's a good question because it took me over a decade to plan and outline my series and characters between school and life in general. I don't have an exact start date for when I began writing my actual first published book, but the idea started from these two original characters that I added to a story that my friend Samantha and I were working on together back in 2002. So wow, like many years ago now, 18 years ago now. But Tainted Moonlight was actually first published in October of 2016. So that was about 14 years of writing and rewriting, taking those characters and really fleshing them out. Their story came to be. I actually rewrote it over a dozen times before I actually released it, and then another time after my editor went through and fixed my tenses. So now though, now that I've spent all that time though, and I've laid out the groundwork and I know my characters, it is a lot easier. It took me a couple years to write Captured Moonlight, the sequel, and it took me about that long to write Infected Moonlight, maybe a year and a half actually for that. And that's also the biggest book I've ever written. So, and yeah, it does get faster. I think you've told me before, it gets faster the more you write.
Yeah, I've having written a series myself. I feel the same way. When I got into the second and third book, I could relate to the characters a lot better
Yeah.
and
So
the background and everything.
yeah, exactly. So my goal ultimately would be to get maybe 2 books out per year if I can, but that sometimes varies depending on the school year and things like that too, because I'm also a teacher and all that stuff. But ideally, I'd love to get at least 2 books out a year.
Yeah. What famous person would you like to meet
Well, thanks to going to a lot of conventions, I've had the pleasure of meeting a lot of people on that list already. I've been very, very fortunate. So I've had a lot of neat encounters with some famous people. But my ultimate goal is to one day meet the Supernatural trio, and that is Jensen Ackles, Jared Padalecki, and Misha Collins. Like, I would, I'm pretty sure I would be a puddle of fangirl goo when I meet them, but I hope to one day meet them if I get the chance. I would absolutely love that. They just seem like such a fun bunch of guys, and I love Supernatural. It's one of my favorite shows and one of the biggest inspirations. It's my go-to show when I'm feeling down or I need something to kind of veg out to while I'm writing, because I've watched most of the seasons multiple times now, so it's my go-to when I'm kind of in a slump.
Yeah. Where do we go for your website?
Okay, so Tainted Moonlight is available. If you go to taintedmoonlight.com, it is available out on Amazon. It's on Kindle or paperback. The first 2 books in the series are also available on demand at Barnes and Noble. I'm working on getting the third book to Barnes and Noble and some other retailers as well. So that's in the works. I'm also hoping to get it on Audible as an audiobook in the near future as well. So, but in the meantime, if you want to check out the first chapter, I have that available on taintedmoonlight.com under sneak peek.
Okay. That's Erin Kelly. Thank you for joining us, Erin.
Yeah, thank
And
you so much, Nick. I really appreciate it.
yeah, and have a good day, everybody, and we'll see you soon. Bye bye.
All right.